Hello, and thank you for watching our video over the 5 domains of instructional technology. My team consisted of Emma, Jeremy, Kelsey, Megan, and Candace. Each of us was responsible for highlighting one of the 5 domains of instructional technology. You will see 4 of the instructional technology domains represented: development, management, utilization, and design. Evaluation is considered to be still in progress. Thank you for watching.
Development is one of the 5 domains of instructional technology. Development is the process of translating the design specification into physical form. It encompasses a wide variety of technologies employed in an instruction. It's related to the other domains in many ways. It must respond to the demands of evaluation, utilization, and management. It's also driven by theory and design. One unique thing about the domain of development is that it reflects the chronological changes in technology. There are 4 subdomains of development: print technologies, audiovisual technologies, computer-based technologies, and integrated technologies. Print technologies. Print is a way to produce or deliver materials such as books or static visual materials primarily through mechanical or photographic printing processes. Some examples of print technologies are textbooks, graphics, or materials generated in a hard copy form. Typically, they include text, graphic and photographic reproduction. Text is read linearly and visuals are scanned spatially. It is a one-way receptive communication between the teacher and the student. There are static visuals. Print technology relies strongly on principles of linguistics and visual perception, and it's very learner-centered.
Starting off younger, a big thing we did was like Time magazines, which was like specifically for kids, where you would get the magazine, we'd have worksheets, and it was definitely with print materials, and it changed every week, which was really cool. And then we kind of integrated into like the overhead transparency. I remember in math, it was really cool. They had a calculator that showed through on the overhead transparency, so you could see the teacher like pressing the numbers and buttons on the calculator, which made learning a lot different and kind of easing into that.
Audiovisual technologies. Audiovisual technologies are ways to produce or deliver materials by using mechanical or electronic machines to present auditory and visual messages. Some examples include films, slides, and transparencies. They also include television, which is a special example because it is a bridge between audiovisual and computer-based, which we'll talk about next. Some characteristics of audiovisual technologies are they are linear in nature, they present dynamic visuals, they're used in a manner intended by the instructor or the developer, and they are teacher-centered and involve a low degree of learner interactivity.
I remember when I was doing my student teaching, overheads and things like that were very important. And I remember over the weekend I was trying to create a transparency, and I remember that I used the wrong transparency and it fried onto the drum of the system. I mean, I just destroyed this machine. The important thing was to use different types of audiovisual to try to make the learning situation more real.
Computer-based technologies. Computer-based technologies are ways to produce or deliver materials using microprocessor-based resources. Some examples of this are computer-based instruction, CBI, computer-assisted instruction, CAI, and computer-managed instruction, CMI. A more recent example of computer-based technology would be online classes using e-learning or Blackboard softwares. Some characteristics of computer-based technologies are that they can be random and non-sequential as well as linear. Ideas are usually presented in an abstract fashion with words, symbols, and graphics. And learning can be student-centered and incorporate high learner interactivity. Integrated technologies. Integrated technologies are ways to produce and deliver materials which encompass several forms of media under the control of a computer. Some examples of this are a powerful computer with large amounts of RAM, a large internal drive, and a high-resolution color monitor. Some characteristics of this are that they can be random and non-sequential as well as linear. They're presented realistically in the context of learners' experiences. There's a high degree of learner interactivity, and they integrate words and imagery from many media sources. Now that you've heard a little bit of information and gotten a little bit of a personal message, let's do a short review.
The 5 Domains of Instructional Technology. The Domain of Design. The domain of design is the process of specifying conditions for learning. The purpose of design is to create strategies and products at the micro and macro level. It is broken into 4 subcategories: instructional systems design, message design, instructional strategies, and learner characteristics. Now, here's a professional educator, Ping Guile, that uses instructional systems design in her own class.
Instructional system design means a systematic, ongoing process of designing learning experience for the students or for your customer in the future. First of all, it's very important. There are so many components, and the major components include needs assessment. You need to know what's the problem right now and how to solve the problem. Then you have to design. During the whole process, you have to design about learning experience and to match type of learning you want students to go through. And it's very important, you have to design the meaningful learning activities for students. Then we are thinking about development. During the process of design, you have to develop, to revise your design. Then it's very important for you to get assessment, formative assessment and summative assessment for students' learning. That's a big component for design and development. It's very important, in addition to design development, it's kind of implementation. And sometimes, maybe as instructional designer, you don't implement. You design the packages for someone else. And sometimes, maybe as a classroom teacher, most of the time we call it lesson planning. But if you're thinking about as systematic instructional design, you have to think about big picture. Then we are thinking about evaluation. How the project, at the very beginning, you set the goal, where it's going, and evaluation, you have to measure whether students get there.
Okay, and how do you incorporate this into your classroom today?
As a professor at university, I'm designing my instructional package or curriculum, or I said instructional materials start from needs assessment, what my students need to learn, and to know their learner characteristics and to know the context. Then I go through the whole process, and according to certain models, there are components they call the steps, first step and 6 steps. But my view of instructional design is a systematic approach that includes all the components together.
Okay, so why do you think it's important in your classroom?
Because it's important to meet the needs of our students. And most of the time, as instructor or as a classroom teacher, we make assumption. We know what students already know before coming to the class. This assumption based our personal experience or based certain limited data. And it's very important as a teacher or instructional designer to really know what the students need and to know their entrance level. You know, the students nowadays, we have diverse students, learners, and they have different needs. It's very important to do needs assessment at the very beginning. And during the whole process of design, development, evaluation, and you have to refine your design constantly.
All right, thank you.
Message design. Message design is the planning for the manipulation of the physical form of the message. The main process of the message design is to first attract the learner's attention. Once their attention has been attracted, message design then needs to hold the attention of the learner, while including suggestive transitions that include the learner for efficiency and effectiveness. Instructional strategies. Instructional strategies are specifications for selecting and sequencing events and activities within a lesson. Instructional strategies can be broken up into two categories, the micro and macro level. The micro level of instructional strategy is used for organizing instruction on a single idea. Some examples of this would be a definition or an example. The macro level of instructional strategy is somewhat similar in that it is used for organizing instruction, but for more than one idea. Some examples of this would be sequencing, synthesizing, and summarizing ideas that are taught. Learner characteristics. Learner characteristics are those facets of the learner's experiential background that impact the effectiveness of a learning process. Research is done to help explain those facets and the impact of the effectiveness of the learning process. This research overlaps with the category of instructional strategies within the area of motivation. Unlike instructional strategies within the context of learner characteristics, motivation is used to identify variables that impact the effectiveness of the learning process and how to take them into account into the actual process. Trends and issues of instructional design. Instructional design has three major trends and issues: the use of traditional system models, application of learning theory to design, and the impact of new technologies on the design process. Traditional systems design models are debated on the efficiency of ISD models, inflexibility, and how the ISD models are used as a way of curriculum design. Application of learning theory to design. There is worries that the application of the learning theory to design has been insufficiently developed and that there need to be alternative solutions. Impact of new technologies. Technologies are ever evolving within today's society, and more seem to pop up every day. With these new technologies, the instructional design process needs to be altered. Visualization and delivery of instructional design are braced to a new level and will need to keep up with the ever-emerging technologies in order to be effective and efficient. What have we learned? Let's recap on what was presented in this video. In this video, I've displayed what the domain of design is, the four major categories within the domain of design, and the trends and issues within the domain of design. In conclusion, I hope this enlightened everyone and sheds a light upon the domain of design.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Cooper, and I will be narrating the following video about the management domain. Management can be defined as business and organizational activities that get people together to accomplish desired goals and objectives using available resources efficiently and effectively. Management can mean many different things according to what situation, context, or even subdomain that you are describing. There are 5 different subdomains of management that I will be showing you: project management, resource management, delivery system management, information management, and quality control. The video sequences I am going to show you will incorporate my Waukee 9th grade students at Prairie View and how many of these subdomains impact their daily learning. There will be some interesting video sequences that I've also collected along this semester that display characteristics of management. Project management is the planning, coordinating, and controlling of projects. Project managers may be new, short-term team members that often lack long-term authority. Greater control and flexibility in staff decisions is one of the benefits to a project manager. In these video clips, you see my students working on one of their woodworking projects, and you can see that they have to take on the role of a project manager in their daily activities. They have to monitor their own safety, use of materials, and which machines they need to use in order to accomplish the task. In the following sequence of videos, you will see how I use various instructional technology tools like Land School to monitor the use of computers in the classroom. This tool allows me to distribute files quickly, conduct a quick poll or survey of students, and limit their activities on the computer if necessary. My students typically use the computers for design and computer drafting related activities. You will also see my RC and robotics students driving their creations down the hallway. All of this is made possible by different types of wireless information transfer that is stored within their remote controllers. These are great examples that showcase information management. Delivery system management is the planning, monitoring, and controlling of storage and distribution of materials. This can also include product issues, hardware and software requirements, and technical support in instructional technology. I wanted to showcase delivery system management in an interesting and unique way. The videos that you are watching include a crazy contraption that sits on display at the Minneapolis, Minnesota Science Museum that was created in order to showcase the complexity of delivery systems. The machine runs continuously, delivering products from the hopper at the beginning, down a series of tracks where they finally get to their destination, just to begin the journey once more. You will also see a leadership activity that my students participated in this past fall. This was a problem-solving activity that required the students to figure out how to transport students across a rope with various constraints and requirements thrown in. This is an interesting way of personifying delivery systems and the problem-solving elements that are required in order to be successful. Quality control is a process by which entities review the quality of all factors involved in production. Examples can include, but are not limited to, controls, job management, integrity, experience, and qualifications. My students are constantly self-assessing on the quality of their products that they are creating, whether that be measuring twice so that they only cut once in woodworking, going through a design process for a class competition, or in the quality of the design that they create in drafting. Quality control is essential to every classroom teacher and instructional coach. It ensures that each individual is meeting their maximum potential and delivering a consistent product that matches established criteria. Resource management is the planning, monitoring, and controlling of resources, support systems, and services. Resources can include personnel, budget, supplies, time, facilities, and instructional resources. In this video, you can see my walkie robotics team participating in the state competition finals. Students are required to create a robotically controlled device that meets certain criteria. They only have so many parts, motors, and gears that they can use in order to design this machine. The challenge is for students to manage the resources on the field in order to score points for their team. They can also choose to defend against the other team by placing their resources back in designated portions of the field. This is a great way of showcasing resource management in an active way that will engage your students of all ages. As teachers, you must have the ability to manage all of the resources in your classroom, whether that be physical products, digital files, or your instructional technology tools.
Today you will learn about media utilization.
According to Seals and Ritchie, media utilization is the systematic use of resources for learning. Media utilization includes selecting specific technologies and activities for individual learners and then later assessing the results of their experience. Ultimately, these technologies and activities become integrated on a regular basis.
Diffusion of innovations.
According to Seals and Ritchie, diffusion of innovations is the process of communicating through planned strategies for the purpose of gaining adoption. In 1962, Everett Rogers published a book on the diffusion of innovations theory that says, diffusion is the process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. This graphic illustrates the various channels over time and the population within each channel. As you can see, the process begins with the innovators and then reaches the early adopters. We then reach the early majority of adopters, followed by the late majority, and then finish with the laggers most resistant to change. Check out this clip by Dave Mulder, who gives a great example of this theory. According to Seals and Ritchie, implementation is using instructional materials or strategies in real settings. Institutionalization is the continuing routine use of the instructional innovation in the structure and culture of an organization.
Wasn't there a technology committee?
There was a technology committee, that's true. And they chose what software we were going to be using for computers when we first got them, and what age group was going to use certain types of software, and what skills we were going to teach at that level. So there was a technology committee that chose or selected that. Then there was teacher training on those specific tools that we had to use at that time.
So you're talking about like Typing Pal and Success Maker and all of those?
Is this like way back, even when
Word?
Okay.
When we first had to learn Word.
Okay.
Yes.
And Kid Picks.
And Kid Picks, yes.
Like how to even...
Yes. How to use a computer. Okay. And we did have classes, and it was part of our professional development training in early house.
And I know that when I came to the district, it was the year that all of our classrooms got the smart boards
That's what I was going to say.
installed. Yeah. And I know that they had already been installed in some of the junior high and secondary classrooms, and then they began to realize that they would be beneficial for elementary as well. So all the classrooms got smart boards. And again, we had about a day or a half of a day of in-service training on just kind of very basics of how to use it, and then we kind of just had to learn on our own or through people who have had experience.
And then some people got Promethean boards as well, right?
Yes.
So they had to also learn.
And I think the jump to Promethean boards was just been a cost.
Okay.
I think that was the only reason we went to
That would
Promethean
have been
boards. It was cost.
And did we start with computer labs? Like how many of those
Yes.
we thought we needed first? And then we went to...
Now we have laptops.
And mobile labs. Yeah, we have a lot more mobile
When
labs.
did the mobile labs start?
Well, you had them 3 years.
3 years. 3 years we've had mobile labs. And there was no training on those.
This is only supposed to be like 30.
Yeah.
Well, I teach kindergarten, so in my classroom we use it to like project our poems that I'm teaching, and then I'll have students come up for the Promethean board. Sorry, that's using that in our classroom, and the students will come up and highlight words that I call out, or letters or sounds that they know or are able to identify on their own. I also use it as a basis to use my computer for. Like today we used it, we're learning about the life cycle of a chick, and I found a YouTube video on a chicken hatching from an egg, so just using it as another whole group method. I know that when I was teaching preschool, I did have different games that I had up that during different parts of our day the kids could go up and actually play games on it as well. So
I'd say something just different to add to what Amanda said. We teach third grade, and we have document cameras that we use, and that really helps with putting student work up and giving feedback to students directly, and to be able to use it that way.
We do small group activities with it too, where I bring an activity up that relates to something working on adverbs, verbs, the government, and then kids can go over and use it in a small group setting. And then I have one girl who uses it for spelling, like it's her extra work that she can do, extra practice.
Yeah, the interactive programs on the smart board, and I still like the matching and some of that. It just makes it more exciting than a worksheet. But and I like it for when we're doing any kind of reading passage or a vocabulary word, because when it comes up and we can talk about what it means, but with instant access to the internet and be able to show it to everybody, you can give examples of what that word means.
Yep.
And then they can put a picture with the word, and that's very helpful.
And our iPad is used, again, for interventions. I have kids on interventions who use it, and then it's a reward. And
we use it for pictures and
video,
recording themselves retelling stories or something.
Policies and regulations.
According to Seals and Ritchie, policies and regulations are the rules and actions of a society that affect the diffusion and use of instructional technology. Instructional technologists should make it a priority to understand the policies and regulations of an institution and adhere to them with all instruction.
What did we learn?
My name is Brandis Brink. I'm an Introduction to Sociology instructor at DMAC Community College. Today we're going to be talking about the domain of evaluation for a 21st century learning environment. Basically what we're talking about is when we get a new design in a classroom and we want to adopt it and apply it to our own teaching style or teaching skills, how do we know this is going to work for our students or it is working for our students? As educators, the goal is to make sure that they absorb the material we're teaching them and to apply it later in life. So at least that's my goal. So how do we know this is actually taking place? Well, there's a 4-step process for applying the domain of evaluation in a 21st Learning Center environment. We're going to be talking about problem analysis to start with, methods of evaluation. We will also be talking about formative assessments and summative assessments and responses. So we'll talk about the differences between those two, but first we need to ask ourselves some questions. What does to educate mean in a 21st century learning environment? What does it mean to educate our students? What does it mean to evaluate our students? We know what exams are. As instructors and educators, we are used to giving assessments, but what does it mean to evaluate? An assessment doesn't necessarily evaluate anything if it's not geared towards the correct objectives that we need to identify in our material. What is the difference between objectives and goals in the context of simple design projects? So again, we're applying these questions to whether or not new design structures in our classrooms are working for our students, and the way to do this is through a process that we're going to be talking about here in just a minute. So let's start with problem analysis. What are the justifications and reasons for the evaluation? So why are we evaluating our students? What is the evaluation for? And what type of audience are we talking about here? Assessments and evaluations are different across different populations of students. One assessment and evaluation approach is not going to work for every population in the classroom. So you really need to know your audience, and your audience needs to know why they're being assessed and why they're being evaluated. This really helps for them to connect to the material, make it relevant, and really approach it in a different way than if they were to just remember and recite the information later. If we give them the whys, then they understand and they seem to connect with the material better. So this is a good approach when we're talking about evaluating new designs in the classroom. This is a good approach. We also need to talk about the specific outcomes that we're looking for. So before we decide whether an approach or a design is working for our students, we need to talk about what outcomes we're looking for. Are we looking for the higher order thinking? Are we looking for critical analysis? Bloom's taxonomy, so we're looking at applying those higher order thinking patterns in the classroom, or are we just looking for memorization and regurgitating the information? Of course, we strive for that higher order thinking, but we need to pinpoint the real outcome that we're looking for to be able to assess whether that design is working in the classroom. The second step in that process to really evaluating whether the new designs that we're adopting are working for our students is the criterion referenced measurement. So here we're talking about exams and tests and assessments. The methods of evaluation is really key in deciding whether our designs are working or not. We need to know a timeline of the activities we give our students, so we really need to kind of break down what our students are doing in order to know if they're working, right? I mean, that makes sense. So we might make students keep a diary or a calendar of events and classroom activities that they're doing in the classroom. This helps for us to assess whether those activities are really engaging the student and attaching the material to those learning objectives. What about a program checklist? That's another way to really assess or engage measurement in our classrooms. Hi, sorry for that brief pause. We all know in teaching and learning and as facilitators and instructors, things do not always go the way we want them to, especially with technology. We have to roll with the punches as instructors, so let's get back on it. So we were talking about program checklists. So it's important that we actually have a checklist of the materials we're using in the classroom as far as what they're doing to promote professional design in the classroom as far as the structure for learning. We need that checklist. We will be reviewing the materials to ensure those materials meet the content objectives. This is very important. Again, going back to those objectives, we need to make sure all of our structure in the classroom are promoting the goals and objectives that we have. And then we can also interview participants or staff members that are part of the design in the classroom. That is not the most practical for what I do working at DMAC. I do not have time to interview people in my classroom and my students. What I like to do, we'll be talking about this in the next section, are assessments, formative and summative. I really find that summative assessments can take the place of those interviews, and so I substitute them. That might be a good idea for you if that's not practical. Let's move on to formative assessments as the third key piece in identifying appropriate design for the classroom in a 21st century learning environment. This would include the validity of the tests that we're using in the classroom. So we need to know that students, their perceptions and interpretations of the assessment tool is correct. And this is easily understood by how well our students do in the formative assessments. Sometimes I will look at the exams that I give my students, and if overwhelmingly the students have struggled with that exam, I know that that formative assessment is not being perceived or interpreted by my students in the way that I had hoped, and that's okay. We need to go back and fine-tune these things, and that helps us to really understand how our approaches as facilitators are working or not. We will be talking about how about participating in a survey with our students. If our students, we need to know if the design is working for them in the classroom, they might want to participate in a survey that I give out in class. This really helps to assess whether they are getting that material, they're engaging that material, and those learning concepts that they're being asked to engage are preparing them for these assessments in the correct way. We also might do a thorough interview. Again, I don't like to kind of take time to do this. I shouldn't say that. I don't have time. I don't have time to do this throughout the semester. I have time to maybe do one snapshot mid-semester in the summative assessment kind of approach in order to encapsulate what's working for them and what's not, and then fine-tuning that throughout the rest of the semester so that I get it right by the end of the semester for my students. Let's move on to summative responses. This is kind of where I like to live as a sociology instructor. I like to apply the ethical decisions or moral principles to deciding whether information is worth retaining for my students, and how that innovation creeps in there in order to get that information to my students. An example of the summative evaluation can include changes in students' behavior or attitude after being taught the learning objectives of the design project. So I could ask them after a project is done, say I put them in small groups, and I actually asked students to do a family research project where they were given a budget in order to see how stratification really affects different classes. And I asked them at the end of that project to do a summative response of whether that learning objective, right, what I asked them to know and to kind of grasp throughout that chapter, if that really applied to the activity I had them do. So I could see at the end of that project if they really got it, if they really were able to apply that concept to the activity and make that connection that I so wanted them to learn. And that is an example of how I would do a summative response with my students. Another way to do that is a short-term expressed or inferred intent of the target audience through post-testing or comments on a follow-up survey. So like that summative response that I asked them to do in a paragraph or a paper, a short paper, I might want them to do a follow-up survey of their experience with that project that would include the same kind of questions I had posed to them in that short summary response. So that is a good way to really kind of wrap up projects and really know if we want to use them in the future for future courses. I'm always looking to fine-tune projects that I think are beneficial to my students and make them better, and make them more clear, and make them understand that concept just a little bit better. So that really is what we're talking about today. Again, we've covered problem analysis. We need to decide what problem we want to tackle. As in any research kind of process, we have to identify a problem or a need first. The second would be how to evaluate how we're going to tackle that problem. So we need to evaluate a method for approaching that problem. And then we need to formatively assess that approach. Then we can also include summative responses after we do the formative assessments. That is a good piece of that as well. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of key tip process through the 4 steps to really identifying whether your design project is really working in the classroom, how to fine-tune it, how to make it better, and I'm sure your students are going to appreciate it. I know this is something I take great pride in, so thank you for being with me this afternoon, and hope to see you in the classroom.
That concludes our video, and thank you for watching.